Welcome to the Hockey History Storyteller Podcast. This is the podcast where you can learn about past players, coaches, teams, leagues, and events. The game we know and love today was created from our past. I'm your host, hockey player and fan, Andy Courtwright. Episode 21, Jean Béliveau, Superstar and Gentleman, Part 2. If you are a long-time listener to this podcast, you are probably wondering if you missed Jean Béliveau Part 1. Well, no, this is the first Jean Béliveau episode. Part 1 was another superstar and gentleman, and Jean for that matter, Jean Ratelle from episode 6. Look for a Part 3 down the road as there are many gentlemanly superstars in our game. In fact, many of them Lady Byng Trophy winners. Jean Béliveau was born in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, Canada. He was a big player in his era at 6 foot 3 inches tall, 205 pounds, but he played with grace, power, and deceptive speed. Jean played 1,125 National Hockey League games. He registered more than a point a game with a total of 1,219 points. He was the fourth player in league history to get to 500 goals, having amassed a total of 507. He was the second player in league history to reach 1,000 points after Gordie Howe reached that milestone. Jean Béliveau was a teenage star in Quebec and was only 15 years old when Montreal first took notice. The Canadiens acquired Jean's professional rights, but he settled in to play for the Quebec Aces of the Quebec Senior Hockey League. Apparently, he was earning well above the NHL average pay at the time. He did play a few games here and there with Montreal, but kept turning down the team to join permanently. Frank Selke got tired of waiting for Béliveau, and legend has it he bought the rights to the QSHL and converted the league to a professional league. Since the Habs held Jean's professional rights, he could only play with them. Selke offered a generous contract that was signed, and Béliveau joined the team full-time at the start of 1953. In his first full season with the Canadiens, Jean scored 73 points and came in third in the league in scoring. The next year, 1955-56, he won the scoring title with 47 goals and 88 points. He added the MVP Hart Trophy along with the Art Ross Trophy that season. He would go on to win another Hart Trophy in 1963-64. The season after that, he was the league's first Conn Smythe Trophy winner as the playoff MVP, having scored 16 points in the 2 rounds of the playoffs. Many NHL players have won this many trophies, but how many have a trophy named after them? The Jean Béliveau Trophy is awarded each year to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League top point scorer. Jean Béliveau was a key contributor to 10 Stanley Cup winning Montreal teams. He would go on to add another 7 Cup wins as a member of the front office. Jean was a 9-time All-Star, and he was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame 1 year after retiring in 1971, alongside Gordie Howe, who retired from the NHL for the first time that same season. Béliveau won his 10th Cup as a player in 1971. Ken Dryden said, quote, Jean Béliveau said one time that 1971 was his favorite cup because it was a gift. The one that came out of nowhere. The one that should happen at the end of the career that he had, but wasn't going to, but then it was. Of course, Ken Dryden was the goalie, a rookie goalie, for the Canadiens at that 1971 Stanley Cup. Hockey fans probably know that the record for the 3 fastest goals in an NHL game by one player is held by Chicago Blackhawk Bill Mosienko, who scored 3 goals in 21 seconds. Jean Béliveau holds the record for second place with 3 goals in 44 seconds. As noted in episode 7 about Doug Harvey, the team on a power play in the 1950s would stay on the power play for the full duration of the penalty regardless of how many goals were scored by the team with the player advantage. On November 5th, 1955, Boston's Cal Gardner was called for a penalty at the end of the first period. At the 42-second mark of the second period, Jean Béliveau scored past goalie Terry Sawchuk and was assisted by Bert Olmsted. Olmsted also assisted Jean on the next 2 goals at the 106 mark and the 126 mark of the period. To add to this story, Béliveau would score a 4th goal and a 4-2 victory over the Bruins. When Jean Béliveau joined the Canadiens in 1953, he told himself, quote, Now it's up to me to keep this organization where it is and, if possible, to make it better for those who are going to follow me. He certainly did just that. Across the board, you will find quotes from teammates and opponents alike that tell you how nice and gentlemanly Jean Béliveau was on and off the ice. There are quotes about his elite skill. All of that is enough to make for an interesting podcast. When I looked for an amusing anecdote to include in this episode, I couldn't find one. So what did I do to find one? After all, it is 2023, therefore I learned and used ChatGPT. So here is what I got from AI. Early in his NHL career, Béliveau was on a road trip. One night in the hotel, he heard a heated argument going on next door. The argument seemed like it would go on all night. Jean decided to call the room, and when the person answered, Jean said, "Excuse me, but we're trying to sleep in here. Could you please lower your argument to a dull roar?" The person on the other end of the line, completely unaware who he was speaking to, responded with, "Who do you think you are, Jean Béliveau?" His response, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. Now could you please keep it down?" The room fell silent. Thank you for listening to the Hockey History Storyteller podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. Also, please share with your hockey pals. Feel free to leave a comment or email ideas for future episodes to me at hockeystoryteller@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at hockeystorytell, Instagram hockeystoryteller, and Facebook, also Hockey Storyteller.